Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier, and once again, thank you for stopping by. I'm very much looking forward to going to a Parents' Day for my daughter Layla today, so on that note, I'll pull up a photograph of her on the top of Mount Kenya 944 days ago. And yesterday I reminded her as we were driving home that I used to play her a Kanye West song, and very loudly. And she used to get quite embarrassed for me. And the song's called Champion, and it's linked on the website. And the chorus says, did you realize that you were a champion in their eyes? And I think it's a great song when you want to build confidence. And I played it to her yesterday. Of course, my favorite Kanye West song remains Touch the Sky, and that's also linked on the front page if you care to have a listen to it. I thank CCTV News for the crossover with Beijing that I did yesterday regarding the Prime Minister Abe Shinzo's visit to Africa. And I said there were a number of threads to this visit. Obviously there is, I said that I believe that Abe Shinzo is the point man for Barack Obama's pivot to Asia. I think, until now we don't know, what kind of leash Obama has Abe Shinzo on. I tend to think that the Prime Minister has a very nationalist outlook and will be difficult to rein in the future, but nevertheless he's the point man for that. I believe that's all about the encirclement of China and essentially then blockading, the ability to blockade China. And given the amount of energy that's coming out of Africa, you've got to blockade Africa as well. And that was called distant blockade operations. But anyway, that aside, I think that the Japanese wouldn't mind throwing some sand in the eye of China in Africa, but beyond that, and I'm going to come to it in a minute, I think they've taken a very nuanced position. A lot of it is to do with energy security post-Fukushima, and I'll come and talk about that all in a minute. Just to remind you, we've uploaded the entire footage from Christine Lagarde's Mindspeak, she did say in that Mindspeak that the global recovery that is underway remains uneven and subdued, and its underlying dynamics are shifting. Recent indicators suggest that activity in advanced economies is gaining momentum. And then I was, of course, took that as an opportunity to talk about rabbit holes and that quote, which I think is so fantastic, by Thomas Pynchon. No matter how the official narrative of this turns out, these are the places we should be looking, not in newspapers or television, but at the margins, graffiti, uncontrolled utterances, bad dreamers who sleep in public and scream in their sleep. I'll put up a photograph from that Mindspeak of Vimal, myself, and Christine Lagarde. Another one of Hannah, Aisha, my eldest daughter, and Christine. And it was Christine had a very pro-women stance, and I said to everyone that I'm a militant feminist, and that's nothing to do with the fact that I've got a wife and 3 daughters. It's just that's the way it is. Home thoughts. I'm going to put up a photograph of a Baobab tree, which is being environmentally protected at base titanium, and it's rather grand because they've dug all around it and just left this extraordinary tree. And then when we were in Diani, we visited the Congo Mosque, which I think is one of the oldest mosques on this side of the continent. I don't think it's as old as those in Mali and places like that. And I took a photograph of the Baobab tree in front of the mosque, and you could see the beach through that. And on that note, I'll quote Jorge Luis Borges: "The mind was dreaming, the world was its dream." BD Live, which is a South African website, says Japan is shaping up for a bigger role in Africa. And listen to these quotes, they're quite brilliant actually. "Africa now carries the hopes of the world thanks to the potential of its resources and its dynamic economic growth," he said after a minute's silence for the late former President Nelson Mandela. I myself would like to visit Africa multiple times to support vigorously these efforts to bring about a brilliant future for Africa. Mr. Abe pledged $320 million in assistance for African conflict areas and natural disasters, and made an intriguing promise to share the Kaizen philosophy for making workplaces happy and productive. And he also said, this is brilliant, when African women shine, Africa will most certainly be truly radiant. And I couldn't agree more with that. And then in this same speech in Addis Ababa, he said, a considerable number of Japanese believe that Africa is the hope for Japan. When Japanese companies that value each and every individual come to Africa, a win-win relationship in the truest sense can emerge, he said. And then when you contrast that with Wang Yi, who was visiting at the same time, his focus was on government-to-government relationships between China and African nations. Wang called for both countries to firmly support each other's core interests and major concerns. And basically, you can see the difference between the two approaches. And I'm going to come to what I think about the Japanese approach. However, they're playing different games, and bear in mind, China's way ahead of the curve. I mean, its trade with Africa, 170 billion in 2012 versus 25 billion for Japan. But I think Japan will now grow much faster and off a lower base. I'll put up a photograph of Shinzo Abe with the Ethiopian Prime Minister Haile Mariam Desalegn. And he, quote again, Abe, the Abe administration is the administration that has placed the greatest emphasis on Japan's relationship with Africa, he said. So my conclusions are, let's set aside for the moment the fact that I see the Prime Minister, Abe Shinzo, as the pivot to Asia's point man, and that China is seeking to explore how tight the leash is, and that's why you're getting these incremental advances and trying to work out whether they can keep pushing. I think that's their strategy. As I said, Japan is behind the curve vis-a-vis China and Africa, and that's a fact. However, I think the Japanese Prime Minister has made a sophisticated, nuanced, and highly effective intervention, and the clues are in the linguistics to which I was referring. And of course, post-Fukushima, Japan has an appetite for African natural gas, and it's a national security issue. On that note, let me put up a photograph of a fireman awaiting new arrivals at a decontamination center for families who were in the potential contamination zone around the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant. And another photograph of the Prime Minister joining a cultural dance in Ethiopia, and a photograph of him visiting the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa on Tuesday. There's been a little bit of brouhaha in Israeli-US relations. Is Secretary of State John Kerry, who arrived here determined, who operates from an incomprehensible obsession and a sense of messianism, can't teach me about the conflict with the Palestinians. This is Moshe Yaalon, the defense minister, and the State Department rebuked Israel quite sharply. But I think there's an interesting geopolitical strand of thinking that actually the US is now going to realign itself completely with Iran as its national security partner in the Middle East. I'm not sure the US is at that point, but if you look at the language coming out of Israel and Saudi Arabia, you can both see that they're very, very nervous, that there are risks around their previously extremely privileged position. China has insisted it will regulate fishing in the disputed South China Sea under its laws, despite protests by neighboring countries, a Philippine official said Tuesday. And basically, the Department of Foreign Affairs spokesman Raul Hernandez said the Philippines had asked China to clarify the edict and had been told by Beijing that it was an implementation of Chinese fisheries law. And you see, that's what I mean by incremental advances against this encirclement, about which I've spoken severally. And then Nigeria, first the police targeted the gay men, then tortured them into naming dozens of others who are now being hunted down, human and rights activists said. That's not good, I'm afraid. The World Bank is saying 2014 may be the year of strength for the global economy. After 5 years of 5 years after the global financial crisis, the world economy is showing signs of bouncing back this year, pulled along by recovery in high-income economies, says the World Bank. Saying the recovery is most advanced in the US, which is what Lagarde said as well, with GDP expanding for 10 quarters now, projected to grow 2.8% this year from 1.8% in 2013. Euro area they've got growing at 1.1% this year after 2 years of contraction. Global economic indicators show improvement, but one does not have to be especially astute to see there are dangers that lurk beneath the surface. Quite true as well. I like this comment from Kaushik Basu, who says it's important to avoid policy stasis so that the green shoots don't turn into brown stubble. Angola is expected to grow 8%, China 7.7, that looks high to me, India 6.2, that looks high to me as well for now. And then I was just referring back to those comments that Lagarde made, that the global recovery underway remains uneven and subdued, and its underlying dynamics are shifting. Recent indicators suggest that activities in advanced economies is gaining momentum. So pretty much the World Bank reiterating her message. Currency markets, the euro 136.34, dollar touched the weakest level since January 2nd of 136.99, and then subsequently has advanced against the euro 80.86 on dollar index hawkish comments, and I'll come to them. Japanese yen weaker at 104.45, posted a record $5.7 billion shortfall in its current account, and that deficit is the biggest going back to 1985. That softened up the yen. Swiss franc 0.9060, pound 164.24, Aussie 0.8914. Remember, it popped over 90 not too long ago, and this is its steepest 2-day slide since December 12. India rupee 61.615, South Korean won 1063.90, the Rial at 235.31, Egyptian pound going back towards that 7 level 698.04, and I think that's all around the relaxation in restrictions for money transfer out of the country into dollars, which I spoke earlier. The South African rand is at October 2008 lows, 1088.43. World Bank raised its global growth forecast yesterday to 3.2% this year from a previous estimate of 3%. Dollar index, I'm going to put up a 3-month chart, and Plosser from the Philadelphia Fed said he would prefer to end the central bank's quantitative easing before late 2014. Dallas Fed President Richard Fisher, who was always hawkish, said he would aim to eliminate the program entirely at the earliest practicable date. So it popped a little bit higher. Let's see if we can push through 81. But for now, as I've said previously, although we're getting quite a bit of volatility and the dollar has made some upside traction of late, I don't think we're in that massive dollar rally that I thought we were going to enter last year. Euro dollar 136.34. I'll put up a 3-month chart. I remain constructive on the euro. Basically, it's the most orthodox in terms of economy, balance sheet size. Dollar yen 104.45. And interestingly, foreign banks lending in Japan to their main offices, an indicator of demand for the yen to fund purchases of high-yielding assets, climbed for a 4th month in November to $79.5 billion equivalent, the most since December 2008. Commodity markets, gold slipped a little bit, 12.40.14. As I've told you before, I expect a $1,000 print at some point in 2014. Crude oil, I'll put up a 5-day chart, $92.78. And, I've spoken about this before, and I think the Barack Obama-Hassan Rouhani rapprochement is still in play and continues to thaw the geopolitical premium. Sub-Saharan Africa, South Sudanese rebels said they captured Malakal, the capital of oil-rich Upper Nile state. Opposition forces loyal to former Vice President Riek Machar seized Malakal today after 72 hours of heavy fighting. That was a rebel spokesman, Brigadier General Lul Ruai Koang, in a phone interview to Bloomberg. The fighters now plan to capture Bentiu, capital of neighbouring Unity State, within days, he said. Rebels lost control of Bentiu on January the 10th. South Sudanese President Salva Kiir's spokesman said fighting was continuing in Malakal after the rebels pushed our forces back to the airport. It's not as yet clear who's in control, so it remains fluid. I think Machar poses a potent threat and has to be accommodated, and I think Salva's inclination is to try and crush him. I'm not sure that's going to work. I don't think it's got a binary solution, in effect. Ban has strongly condemned the commandeering of humanitarian vehicles and the theft of food stocks and other relief items by government and anti-government forces. The World Bank's Sub-Saharan Africa Outlook is posted on rich wrap-ups. Just scroll down to Sub-Saharan Africa, lots of interesting data, saying economic growth picked up in Sub-Saharan Africa in 2013, supported by strong domestic demand. Real GDP for the region grew at an estimated 4.7%, excluding South Africa. If you excluded South Africa, growth was higher at 6%. So you can see South Africa is such a big component of Sub-Saharan Africa as a drag on it right now. FDI continued to flow into the region. FDI flows were estimated at 43 billion in 2013, up from 37 billion in 2012. Talking about fiscal balance deterioration, particularly amongst oil exporters, public debt has risen from 29% of GDP in 2008 to an estimated 34% of GDP in 2013. Robust domestic demand is expected to continue to support growth in the medium term, despite global financial conditions to which countries in the region are relatively insensitive. Regional GDP is projected to strengthen to 5.3% in 2014, rising to 5.4% in 2015, 5.5% in 2016. Talking about inflation being on a downward trend, net FDI inflows resilient, remittances all going to stoke up good domestic demand according to them. But what's strange is, and do have a look at rich wrap-ups, because I've copied and pasted it, and they've got all the countries and they've got projections, historical GDP growth rates from 2010 and then projections all the way up to 2016. What was interesting, for example, about Kenya is they've got Kenya growing at 5% in 2013, 5.1% in 2014, 5.2% in 2015, and 5.3% in 2016. Aidan, who I communicate with on Twitter, thought and tweeted exactly what I was thinking. That was way too linear. And Kenya really needs a faster growth rate than that to affect some serious trickle down. Senegal, interestingly, bonds have been seriously outperforming over the last 6 months. General bondholders are very happy with Macky Sall and his sort of strategy, and basically the premium buyers' demand to hold Senegal notes rather than US Treasuries fell 98 basis points in 6 months to yesterday. Significant contraction. And somebody else saying Senegal's performance will be the fiscal story. The fact that yields came in at 6.7%, while Ghana's are still over 8%, suggests that people are rewarding Senegal for some of those recently solid metrics compared with Ghana, which is going off the rails on the fiscal front. South African all shares down 0.54% this year. Dollar versus Rand, I'll put up a 1-month chart, last trading at 10.8847. And I said to Rama in an interview and on CNBC that, the Rand is always, well, it is at the bleeding edge of the Fed taper. It's at October 2008 lows, and apparently Statistics South Africa has said growth in mining output slowed to 5.1% in November from a revised 23% the previous month. The Association of Mine Workers and Construction Union are looking at whether to go on strike in their platinum mines. So it continues to see uncertainty. The Egyptian pound, that's slightly weaker at 698.08. The Egyptian stock market is Africa's best this year. It's up over 50% since Morsi exited stage left. We're up 6.09% this year. And you remember, I got bullish about it a while back. The Nigerian all shares up 0.27% this year. S&P, however, are warning that Nigeria may overstate oil production in its 2014 budget. Interesting report in there. Angola Cables is laying a new fiber optic undersea cable as part of the so-called South Atlantic Cable System, a network to develop telecommunications in Africa. Antonio Nunes, the chief executive of Angola Cable, said this link will provide faster access from South America to Asia, eliminating the need to pass through North America and Europe and reducing the distance between the Sao Paulo and Hong Kong stock exchanges, which could be very interesting for the banking sectors. What he's really referring to is called latency, which is the speed of the internet. And he's basically saying that he's giving a faster route for transactions between those two stock exchanges. Prince of Logistics, ex-Blackwater chief, looks to China, Africa. This is about Eric Prince. It's from an article in Reuters at the FT. It's on Rich Reynolds if you want to read it. Guinness, a fabulous documentary about the sappers. The sappers are these incredibly flamboyant folks in Congo, Brazzaville. If you get a chance to look at it, so again, it's linked there. Standard Chartered's private equity arm has taken a 13% stake in Botswana-listed supermarket chain Choppy's Enterprises. Choppy's has a market value of $456 million. The World Bank, as I said, is forecasting Kenya GDP 5% last year, 5.1% this year, 5.2% next year, 5.3% 2015, etc. I think we need faster growth than that, in my view. The Dubai-based firm, which is seeking to buy CMC, has indefinitely extended the period that the auto dealer's shareholders can accept its offer for fear of an undersubscription. Shareholders controlling 50.6% have agreed to support the takeover. It means that they've still got to get 24.4% from retail investors, and there is apparently a 1 shilling a share break fee. New cement levy set to push the cost of homes higher. Najib Balal has introduced a cement levy, which equates to 140 shillings tax per tonne of cement. Kenya shilling firm at 86.145, strengthened a 5th day, and this will be a 6th day, and this is the highest level since the start of the year. The Nairobi all share up 3.0296%. This year snapped a 2-day losing streak yesterday, and has had a very strong start to the year, second best in Africa. NSE 20 still above 5,000. That's key for the bulls, and it's up 1.95% so far this year. Everyone will be looking for that. The 5,000 level is a sort of key, sort of psychological level. Yesterday, 30 winners, 16 losers. I expect the Securities Exchange to make it a 3-year rally in 2014. I think the imminent issue of the dollar-denominated Eurobond will release the pressure valve in the domestic bond market, and we should see interest rates trend lower, and that will be supportive for the stock market. Interestingly, agricultural counters, except for Limuru, which actually trades at the steepest discount when you compare it versus its net asset value, were firm. Assassini's been on a bit of a roll, up 4.32% yesterday. Safaricom closed unchanged at 11.65. It had a real quick start out of the blocks and was the precipitator, I think, for the broader indices moving so well early, so far this year. KCB equity banks on good action. KCB unchanged at 46.75. Insurers have been strong. Kenya Re, in particular, has been rallying for a while, but it's on a very cheap PE of just 4.3. Kengen, this was the big story yesterday, had retreated 26.25% since the beginning of December through yesterday morning. rallied 6.78% yesterday and has rallied again by its daily maximum today. Home Africa has been on the up. If you want to have a look at that, have a look at rich.co.ke, go to rich data and you can see all the information around the various stocks. Once again, deeply grateful for you stopping by and listening to my musings. I do appreciate it. Thank you.